morning. Merry Christmas. We're almost there. Oh my gosh. Hey, so you guys, a lot of you don't recognize who I am. I'm so glad to be with you. Thank you for having me. I'm not Santa Claus. That mistake has been made several times this morning, so that's not me. But I am Adrian, down from Walnut Creek. So excited to be here with you guys to continue in the series. Did you guys talk about the worst Christmas present you ever got? How many people, like while you were talking about it, was there a clear winner in your discussion group of like, oh yeah, that is the worst present I ever got? I heard someone over here talk about like some kind of weird soap that smelled up their whole bathroom. That's pretty bad. Anyone else? Raise your hand if you're like, yeah, I had the worst. You're not going to have to share it. I just want to know that there are other people who are like, yeah, I got a loser as a Christmas present. A couple of us? Yeah. All right. Well, did you fake? Did you pretend like you were happy even though you got the soap and you were like, whoa, that smells like feet? You know? How many people here got a bad present and were like, I still got to act like it was great to get this? Yeah. Yeah, we do that, don't we? You know, the worst present, I think the worst present I got was when I was 11, I got a bottle of Chaps cologne and soap on a rope. I was 11. You know, I don't even know if I was bathing regularly. Maybe that's why they gave me the cologne. They're like, dude, you need it. I did not pretend like I was happy about it. I let my sadness be known. My birthday is right before Christmas. And so what that means is you get some loser Christmas presents because this is a true story, absolutely true. I opened up a present for my birthday and it was a pair of socks. And the card said, the left sock is for your birthday, the right sock is for Christmas. Ha ha. And this was like from a family member. I was like, no, you're a horrible person. I understand. I am also a horrible person, but that hurt me. I was always, I think in most families, there's always one kid who's the hyper-vigilant one about presents. That was absolutely me. So there were 4 kids in my family, 3 of us boys, and so I would always count how many presents everyone got. And it's hard, because at a certain point you get old enough to realize I'm not supposed to count, so I have to count without looking like I'm counting. So I'd be side-eyeing my younger brother going that's 4 gifts. I have 2. So with the boys, I'd always keep track, not with my sister, because she was the youngest and she was the only girl, so she got triple the gifts that we did. That was just never going to change. But with my brothers, I always thought we should get the same amount, so I'd always watch. And I also did this thing. So I don't know if they warned you when you came in. I don't know if at the door they said, hey, the guy speaking tonight is tonight? This morning, this guy, he's kind of a jerk, so just be prepared. But I am. So you're forewarned. When I was a kid, not only would I count the number of presents, I would kind of do a cash value estimation on presents to keep a running tally in my mind and think oh, so my parents spent X number of dollars, in my estimation, on my big brother, and I only got this. So, yeah, you guys are going wait, do we need to listen to this guy? I'm a little nicer now than I was then. But that's what I would do because I was hyper-vigilant about that stuff. When it comes to Christmas gifts or birthday presents, don't we try to give people we love what we know they want? I mean, that's kind of the point, isn't it? If we know what someone wants and we care about them, don't we want to give that to them? I remember wanting a remote control car. You guys are too young to even know what remote control cars are. So back in the days before phones, when you'd sit around and be bored, you would have to do stuff like play with a remote control car, all right? So that's what we would do. And I wanted a remote control car so bad. And so I left notes. I wrote a list. I told my parents. I did not keep it a secret. And so on Christmas Eve, when we opened presents in my family, I was sure. I was 100% I'm getting a remote control car. That was all I asked for. And I remember watching my younger brother and my older brother open up presents, and they got remote control cars. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome, because the three of us are going to be able to race our remote control cars. And I was so excited, and I tore through all of my presents, the sweater from my aunt, soap on a rope, and so I opened my last present, and I'm like, what? There's no remote control car. And I was like, wait, there's got to be some mistake. And so I remember going through all the wrapping paper, kind of going like, maybe I missed it. There wasn't one. I looked behind the Christmas tree. I'm like, there's no remote control car. And I remember being like really, really sad. And so I did that thing where you throw a tantrum and cry. And so that's what I did. I was crying. Like, I was only a kid. I was like 19 years old. And so no, that's still a kid, right? No, so I was like 9, I think, and I was crying because I didn't get the remote control car, because I knew if I got that remote control car, I would just be a better person. I'd get along with my brothers. Everything would be great, but I didn't get it. And so I was sad, and I was crying, and I threw a tantrum. And then when my brothers started to play with the remote control car, they're driving it around in front of the house. I was just bawling. I was so jealous. I was so jealous of them. Even though this was back in the days where they would make these weird remote control cars that would only turn left. Anyone else old enough to? It was like right wasn't invented yet. So it was like they started building it and they got halfway and they're like, you know what? It's quitting time. Who turns right anyway? And so they had these remote control cars, only turned left, and I was still jealous of those remote control cars. So I was just sitting on the front steps of our house crying. And I didn't notice that my tia, my aunt, snuck out and went to a store because I was throwing a tantrum, as one does. And so I remember they're playing with the car, and my aunt comes back, and she played that thing where she's like, oh, we forgot this. Santa must have brought one and left it outside. And she gives it to me, and I tear open it, and it was, of course, a remote control car. And it was awesome. It was faster than my brother's, and it turned left and right. So I was just like, yes, throwing a tantrum paid off. No, I didn't think that. But it was exactly what I wanted, and I was so excited. I remember I ran up to my aunt, and I gave her the biggest hug because I knew that she had gotten this for me. And I remember as I was hugging her, I looked up at her face, and she had this enormous smile on her face, this huge smile. And I remember that smile, and I think it's important for us to recognize that part of the joy of Christmas is giving someone we love something they want. I had a friend who would bake a birthday cake for Jesus on Christmas. And then he'd make his kids get up and sing happy birthday to Jesus. Kind of weird, right? I mean, if that's what you do, God bless you, that's great. But it felt kind of weird. But as I think about it, when I take a second and I actually think about it, I don't know if it's that weird. I don't think it's that strange to actually take time and think about what Jesus wants for his birthday. Maybe we should be thinking, and maybe we should be talking about what Jesus wants for Christmas. Now, before you call me a heretic, I completely understand Jesus is eternal. He's been around forever, part of the Trinity, and so he's been around as long as there's been an around to be in. And so I get that, but his birth here on earth as a person is huge, right? It's what we celebrate at Christmas. And so we have to wonder, what do you think Jesus wants for his birthday? A remote control car? Maybe cash? No. I think we kind of know already, right? We should know. I don't think it's a super secret. But just to be sure, I asked Google AI what Jesus wants for his birthday. Oh, could you guys do me a favor? People who have hair the same color as me, could you explain to them what AI is? Because they're going like, who is that? Is Allen Iverson? That's not what we mean. But I asked Google Artificial Intelligence, what does Jesus want for his birthday? And this is what Google AI said. Let me read this. Jesus wants people to love him with their whole being and to love their neighbor as themselves. Jesus also wants people to show their love through actions, such as feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, providing a room for the homeless, providing clothes for the poor, and spending time with the sick and incarcerated. Some say that the best gift to give Jesus is one's heart and life. When God has a person's heart, they will find it joyful to give him their time, talents, and treasures. What? I'm not sure, but I think the internet just came to the Lord. What? Holy cow, that's pretty good, right? And that's Google AI. It's pretty close, right? I mean, maybe I shouldn't be so afraid of robots taking over the world. It might not be that bad. But, you know, I'm still not ready to turn my faith over to Siri because she still can't pronounce my last name. So I think that we need to work to be sure about what Jesus wants. And just like I did when I was a kid, Jesus tells us it's not a mystery. He didn't keep it secret. Over and over again, Jesus tells us what he wants us to do, commands us. He's been saying it since the beginning. Last week, as Becky said, Steve talked about how we're preparing for Christmas by looking at Jesus' life in reverse. And so we started talking about the resurrection and the crucifixion and how we can't really celebrate Christmas without the resurrection. We don't celebrate Christmas if the resurrection doesn't happen. And that is 100% true. And today, what we're talking about is Jesus' teachings. Not everything Jesus taught, but the biggies. The things Jesus said to guide us and direct us. Because part of why we celebrate Christmas, part of why we celebrate Jesus being born is because of what he taught us, right? How Jesus taught us a new way to live. How Jesus explained to us what really matters in the world. We have to remember that Jesus' message, the words of Jesus, are a huge, huge part of why we celebrate Christmas. His direction to us is part of why we celebrate Christmas. Otherwise, I'm not sure that we're celebrating the birth of Jesus. If we're not celebrating how he taught us to see the world, how he taught us to value things in the world, then I'm not sure we're celebrating Jesus' birth. It's just another holiday. You know, there are a lot of places that we could go to and look at in the New Testament, in the Gospels, to read the actual words of Jesus about what he wants from us. But I thought, let's keep it simple and clear, because let's be honest, we all got to get back home on Amazon to finish our Christmas shopping. So let's look at 4 things on Jesus' Christmas list, 4 things that he wants for his birthday that he said. And first, we're going to look at what Jesus said about following him. Second, we're going to talk about what Jesus said about people who follow him. Third, we're going to talk about the things Jesus said were most important. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the last command Jesus gave us. All right, so let's get started. The first thing, a bunch of people were following Jesus, right? They were hanging around Jesus, and when he was going to speak, they'd show up there, and they're trying to figure out how to follow Jesus, what it means to follow him. So let's listen to what Jesus says to them. This is in Matthew 5, 1 through 10. We call this the Beatitudes. But let me read this to you. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Who does that sound like? Sounds like Jesus, doesn't it? The Beatitudes, the whole Sermon on the Mount sounds just like Jesus. And so Jesus tells the crowd who want to follow him, hey, just be more like me. Be more Jesus-y. That's his guidance to the crowd. Hey, be more Jesus-y. He describes what that process looks like to them. Jesus said these things, these Beatitudes. Blessed means how happy you will be, how good it is for you. It's better for you if you're like this, is what blessed be means. And so Jesus says it's going to be good for you if these things are true of you. And look at those things. Poor in spirit, that means humility and dependence on God the Father. Mourning, Jesus means being sad about the things that God is sad about, the brokenness and injustice in the world. Meek, the word used here was used to describe a lion carrying its cub in its mouth. It means power under control. We usually hear meek and we think, oh, that just means someone who's weak, someone who's a doormat that gets pushed around. That's actually the opposite of what that word means in Greek. It means you have the power to cause damage, but you choose not to. You have the strength or the influence or the advantage to harm someone, but instead of doing that, you use your strength or your advantage or your resources to do good, to help someone. That's what that word means. And Jesus says, just like a lion who will pick up its cub in its mouth to protect it, use your strength to protect other people. Hunger and thirst for righteousness. Remember, righteousness means a right or a healthy relationship with God the Father. If you hunger for it, if we pursue it, if we desire it, we will find it if we're working towards that right relationship with God. Merciful, if we're merciful with others, we get mercy. Jesus is the definition of mercy. Pure in heart, that's our focus. Being focused like a laser on one thing, being focused like a laser, valuing God over anything else, being focused on how we please God, how we obey and follow him. Peacemakers. I mean, Jesus' mission was to bring peace between us and God after the rebellion in the garden. Persecuted. I mean, look at Jesus' life. People lied about him. People hunted him. He was beaten and crucified. Now, remember that it says persecuted for righteousness, not just because you're annoying. That's important for us, because we can all be, especially me, I can be annoying. Jesus wants us to be more and more like him, and he's telling us what that process looks like. Actually, all of Jesus' direction on how to live, all his commands for us look just like him. See, you remember when Jesus would invite his disciples to be part of his community, part of his team? Do you remember what he would say? He would say, follow me. He would constantly say, follow me. And the reason why that matters is because follow me, that phrase was the traditional invitation from a rabbi to a Talmud. It was the traditional invitation from a spiritual teacher to a spiritual student, to a disciple. It doesn't mean, hey, let's go for a walk and you just make sure you don't lose sight of me. It means go where I go and do what I do. It means learn what I do and why I do it. It means value what I value, follow my way of life, have the same priorities as me, become like me. And that's what Jesus wants for all of us. And not halfway like a remote control car that only turns left, but all the way with all of our effort. So that's the first thing on Jesus' birthday Christmas list. list. Jesus wants us to become Jesus-y. That's a word, don't laugh. Or at least I'm going to make it a word. You watch, in like 2 years, everyone's going to be saying Jesus-y. Maybe not. All right, now let's talk about number 2. Let's not talk about number 2. Let's talk about the second thing and look at Matthew 12, 46 to 50. Let me read this to you. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." He replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers, for whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Could you imagine trying to get away with that with your mom? Thanksgiving rolls around and, "Oh, mom's here." Well, who's my mom? Anyone who does what I do is my... No, that's not going to float. But Jesus says that. He says anyone who obeys God is his family. Anyone who does the will of God is his family. Jesus wants us to know following him makes us part of his family, and Jesus wants us all in his family. He doesn't want us to try and do it alone. Jesus wants us together, and not as an organization, but as an organism, as a body, as a family, as his family. So Jesus wants us to become like him. Then Jesus tells us everyone who's becoming like him is in his family. I think what we see is Jesus hinting that there's going to be a family resemblance. That in his family, we're going to start looking like our father. We're going to start looking like our older brother, not physically, but in our actions, in our values, in our priorities, in our words, in the things that we do. Think about it. If we become like Jesus, we'll be humble and include others. We'll be meek and use our influence or power to help others. We'll want a right relationship with God and we'll work at it. We'll be merciful to other people. And we'll be focused like a laser on those things. And we'll make peace between people and bring peace between people and God. And we won't stop even when we're mistreated or persecuted. We'll keep on going with this. Jesus is saying following him and being in his family are one and the same. We can't break mission and community apart. They're the same thing. Jesus wants us obeying him and in his family. And he's not saying this in some symbolic way. I mean, his mom is right at the door, right outside. He's saying it with his family there. He's saying in a very real and practical way, his responsibility, his family relationships, his closeness and care is with those who follow him. And we're in that family. Think about that. We're in that family when Jesus sits there and says, "Who's in my family?" Anyone who follows me follows God the Father and does his will, is my brother, is my sister, is my mom. That's us. Man, I hope we treat each other like family. I hope we start treating each other more like family. Okay, so let's recap again. 1, Jesus wants us to be more like him, Jesus-y. And 2, Jesus wants us to be part of his close-knit, connected family. So let's talk about the third thing on Jesus' birthday Christmas list. In Matthew 22, verse 35 to 40, Jesus is talking, and one of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question. "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments." Now let me read John 15, 12 and 13 to you. Jesus is talking, and he says, "My command is this, love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." Jesus says, All the law and the prophets hang on loving God and loving people. All the laws of the Old Testament and all the direction of the prophets are held up, supported by loving God and loving people. It's important for us right now to take a second and remind ourselves that love is active. We can kind of get fooled into thinking love is a feeling in our culture. We can get fooled into thinking love is just how I feel about someone. That is not true when it comes to Scripture or the way that Jesus and Paul and Peter use this word. In fact, Paul and Peter and James write about most often how to apply loving other people and loving God in our situation, in our relationships, because love is action. Love is doing good for someone and committing to continue to do good, no matter what it costs. And Jesus commands us to love. Let me read you what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. He wrote, "The church is the church only when it exists for others, not dominating, but helping and serving. With that, we get a sense of the work involved when we are invited into God's mission." This is what Jesus wants, for us to actively love others, not in a weak, emotional way, but with strength, with real actions, with real sacrifice. Because that's the thing about love, is it costs something. It always costs something. Love is not cheap. It's not easy. And Jesus wants us to love others like he loves us. Whew. All right, we're almost done. We've read that Jesus wants us to become like him, to be Jesus-y. 2, he wants us to be his family, close and connected, supporting each other. And 3, Jesus wants us to love God and love others with action. Okay, that's already a tougher Christmas list than my daughter's, and she asks for a horse every single year. It's heartbreaking to tell a little girl, no, again, you're not going to get a horse. So this is a tough list. So let's close it out. Let's talk about the 4th and final thing on the list, the thing that Jesus wants us to do. He wants us to bring others with us. Look at John 20:21. "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, I am sending you." Let me read Matthew 28:19 and 20. This is what we call the Great Commission. Jesus is talking and he says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." One of the things I'm most thankful for is that Jesus gives us purpose. In the same way that God the Father sent Jesus on the mission, Jesus invites us to join him in that same mission, to be his family, to become like him, to actively love everyone, and to bring others along with us. That's our assignment. That's what Jesus wants. I'm not sure if that'll fit under a Christmas tree or even how to wrap it, but that is what Jesus wants. That's what he commanded. That's what he asked for. The question this Christmas is, are we willing to give it? This Christmas, will we give these things to Jesus? Will we sacrifice and submit to him? And I don't think Jesus wants these things just for December or just for this season. Jesus wants to be part of his family, wants us to become enough like him that we keep on serving and caring for others, actively loving them and including them into his family from now on, not just for a month. I'm going to pray that I do that year round. And since we're all in the same family, I'm going to pray that we all do that year round. That we commit to Jesus, to what Jesus wants, and together as a family, as his family, we do that. I'm going to pray in a minute, but we're going to have a time of discussion. So once I'm done praying, don't head to the door, because I want us to talk about something. But let me pray right now. Jesus, thank you. it would be weird to talk about you and what you've commanded and asked from us without thanking you for how much you love us. Thanking you for what we're going to celebrate in 10 days. So Jesus, thank you that you came to earth. Thank you that you loved us enough to be here, that you communicated truth, you communicated your values and priorities and what really matters here on earth to us so that we could discover a new way to live. And thank you, Jesus, that you allowed yourself to be crucified and that you resurrected, beating death, conquering sin, because you love us. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for loving us that much because your love changes everything, everything. Lord, help us to love you back in a way that transforms us, in a way that allows us to do these things that you've asked of us. We love you, Jesus, and we thank you. In your name, amen. All right, so at your tables or in your conversation nooks, I want you guys to talk about a couple of questions. They should be on the screen, but I want you to just talk about this year, which of the following do you think Jesus is asking you to give him? And it's any of those four things: becoming like Jesus, becoming more Jesus-y, remembering you're in his family, and treating each other that way, taking actions of love and care towards other people, or bringing someone along as you make this journey. And I want us to talk about which one of these areas is most comfortable for us and maybe which one's going to be the most challenging for us to grow in. So we've got some time, so make sure you talk to the people around you, and when you have to go ahead and go. Other than that, God bless you guys and have a blessed Christmas.